Hey guys, there have been a ton of rumors lately around a photo-oriented GH5 premium camera, premium micro four thirds camera, and that's got my head going all sorts of different directions. So I really hope that the things that I've thought through will be things that you haven't thought about, or that they validate what you have been thinking about. So thank you very much in advance for your time. So the GH5 is totally a video-centric camera. Even some of the stills capture modes like 4K and 6K capture are derived from video features, from video functionality. While the GH5P for photography, that's what I'm going to call it until we know more, comes out, I'm going to assume that they're going to, they have to keep some of those things, right? It's the hardware that's driven the GH5 to being kind of a market leader at the moment for its feature offering for the price point. So I think that we're going to have to expect some of those to roll into the still side. I think we're going to have to expect the hardware to roll into the still side in order to, like I like to say, bring down cost of production overall. But we'll also probably be surprised with some other things. We keep hearing, it's all the time, really, that someone's like, oh, but if only the GH5 could go to a base ISO of 100, or, oh, the dynamic range of the GH5 is so terrible, which it kind of is for a modern camera. You know, the response to that is always, well, it would cost a ton of money in R&D to be able to engineer that size sensor to have a lower base ISO, be it 100 or 50 or 64 or whatever, and to be able to increase dynamic range, especially at something like a 20 megapixel count. And the cost of that R&D would be prohibitive. Largely, I think the GH5 has done a ton to kind of wipe away the prohibitive inhibitions surrounding sensor-based improvement of the format. I can definitely, myself at any rate, see the GH5P coming in at around like $2,300 perhaps to kind of justify all the extra expense that will be required to bring that sensor to really turn it around and build a lot more into it. So before a GH6 comes out, perhaps, I can see the GH5P being the next step in the way Panasonic's electing to innovate. There is always a huge debate over the importance, over the value, over everything about sensor size. But what can't really be contested, in my opinion, is, let me rephrase that actually. What can't be contested according to all of the standardized tests that we have right now is that micro four thirds cannot stand up to modern APS-C sensors, especially when they have really awesome features like backside illumination, when they have things like we're probably going to see out of Sony at least, like stacked CMOS like we're seeing on the 1-inch type and the full frame sensors. But even before those technologies, modern APS-C sensors still are way better on paper than micro four thirds sensors from objective measurements. That's not to say that you can't make better images with micro four thirds. That's all about having the right device in your hands at the right time. I'm not saying that micro four thirds sensors are bad or that you can't take a good picture with a micro four thirds sensor. I'm saying that the dynamic range of a micro four thirds sensor is limited right now by the engineering resources that have been thrown at making it better, whereas APS-C sensors have had a ton more engineering resources thrown at them to make them as good as they can be right now. I hope that doesn't spark a flame war, because it's really not intended to. It's supposed to lead to a really good point. The limitations that current micro four thirds system sensors have is in regards to base ISO dynamic range, as well as high ISO performance. Apart from the very real issues that kind of hover around trying to revolutionize this sensor format, there are a couple of little sneaky tricks that a company could do to get themselves to the next level with a micro four thirds sensor. The first being make it backside illuminated. The second being increase pixel size. The latter is a bit of a gimmick. It doesn't really, bear out in practice, that like we're seeing out of the A7R2, where the backside illuminated sensor makes a much bigger difference with smaller pixels than having larger pixels. where the A7R2 and the A7S2 are largely on par through most of the ISO range. So I think it could be very feasible to see a GH5P with a BSI sensor. I think it could be very feasible to see future Panasonic Micro Four Thirds offerings with BSI sensors. I think, however, they're going to be putting a ton of resources into changing what the sensor is capable of. That still won't solve for everything, though. Putting a backside illuminated sensor in instead of a normal sensor won't solve for everything, right? But in my opinion, there needs to be sensor innovation at the Micro Four Thirds size, because that sensor is kind of at the end of its technological rope. The GH5 has pushed it so far forward. It has, from everything that I've seen and read and what it feels like, that seems like a statement product. That seems like as far as that kind of sensor can go. And it's not to say the Micro Four Thirds sensor, that's saying like a conventionally made, so forth and so on, Micro Four Thirds sensor. As a result, the GH5P will probably have a price tag that will be a prettier penny than the sensor format size would suggest. And even with all that, I highly doubt that a GH5P with a bunch of sensor improvements could reasonably compare to modern APS-C cameras in terms of stills. In my opinion, this is going to be a device that will be very interesting to follow the response to. Will people are drawn towards the GH5 for video predominantly. It feels like it is predominantly a video camera that has a bunch of cool stills features as a result of the video-centric nature of the device. There's a lot of people now that are like, Micro Four Thirds is freaking awesome because they have GH5s, because they use GH5s for video. It seems like there's a lot of people that don't use Micro Four Thirds for photography by comparison to the people that use Micro Four Thirds for video. That could be only the people that I'm interacting with on my own videos, and that could not be indicative of you, new viewer. And in saying that, I definitely don't want to rule out Olympus users, because I know Olympus makes fantastic products. What I'm trying to say, though, is that I wonder if there is a market for a device that's priced with an A7S2 specifically for stills, that has a sensor that's like a quarter the size. So I'm very interested in finding out what the market's response to a device like. But anyway, I'm very curious. I'm very interested. I hope I've shed some light onto what might be required to make a GH5P worthwhile. But anyway, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.